I've got the battery hooked up just temporarily. It's just for test purposes only. I put the seat in and mounted it in there, got the ground all hooked up, and my solenoids are hooked up. I just got an 8-gauge cable running from the battery to the master solenoid here just to supply power to it. I'm not going to run the starter or anything, so all I need to do is just supply power. A 10-gauge wire would have worked fine, or even a 12-gauge wire would have worked fine for what I need to do here. So we tested everything when Jim was here, the mechanic, and everything tested fine. Everything tested good. All the circuits and everything worked the way they were supposed to, except for this indicator light here. This is the indicator light that comes on when you turn the fuel pump on, the auxiliary fuel pump, which is right here. This is the switch for the fuel pump, and that's what pumps fuel from the belly tank up to the main tank. And that light worked in reverse. It was on all the time, and then when you push, it's got a press to test function, and when you pressed it to test it, it would go out. So I assumed that I had the two leads reversed on there. I reversed those leads, took the one off that I had on the bus bar and swapped it over onto the switch, and then I took the one from the switch and put it over on the bus bar, assumed that would work. But that's one of the things I wanted to test, and I'm glad I did, because when I turned it on, it come on still. This is the way it works normally, is see it's off, and the press to test function, it comes on, and there's it off. Turn the fuel pump on and it comes on. Well, that's not the way it was working. It was still working the same way it was before. So what I assumed then was that I had the ground on, the wrong wire on the ground. I had a hot lead on the ground. So I had to do some tests, and I finally figured out which leads were which, and I just had one of the leads on there wrong. So we corrected that. Now we've got a good ground on there, and that light works the way it was supposed to. The other thing that I wanted to test was the push-to-talk switch. Got the wire down here coming up through the floorboards. It goes, there's a push-to-talk switch in the stick, and this is the wire that will connect into it. So I bared the end of that wire, and I've got a switch right here that switches between the marine radio and the VHF radio for the microphone, and I wasn't sure whether I had that on right. So I turned this on, and then by grounding this switch out, I can make sure. So now it's on marine, and when I ground that out, my mic is hot on the marine radio. If I switch it back up here and ground that out, now my transmit light is coming on in my comm radio. That was reversed, and all I had to do to fix that was just to turn that switch over 180 degrees. But those were the two things that I wanted to test out for sure. And the other thing is to test the GPS signal going back to the ELT. But that's about as much as I can test for now. All my other wires, the beacon, landing light, nav lights, stuff like that, power goes to those. All the switches and everything work for those just like they're supposed to. This is the instruction sheet from AKC on how to build a test lead or test light for that ELT for the GPS signal coming to it. It's pretty simple. You've got a 300 ohm resistor, and then going to an LED, and you hook up the one lead to the lead coming out of the GPS or out of the ELT, and one lead here to ground. Turn the GPS on, and you should get a light on there when everything's working right, when you get GPS verification in the ELT. So here's my setup that I made up. I've got a lead coming in, soldered into the lead coming off of the 300 ohm resistor, and then going to the lead on the LED, and then coming back with another lead going for a ground. That one works fine. It's got the resistor in the right circuit. Everything's right on that one, and lo and behold, it works. I'll go ahead, I'm going to put some heat shrink tubing on this, cover that resistor and that bare wire down there, set this up and try to use it. I've got the test light set up in here, hooked into the lead that I left for it. I put a removable connector in there, a quick connector in there, so I can connect it and disconnect it and don't leave a raw end on there or anything. And I've got the ground end here. Almost thinking about fixing that so we can leave that light in there and monitor it anytime. But I tried testing that but it won't work. The GPS won't send out a signal until it locks onto the satellites and has a GPS position or signal to send. It's in here in the basement, and I've got an external antenna that I dug out and plugged into it, but I don't have enough cord to get outside where I have a clear view of the sky. I may just wait to do that until we get the airplane out of the basement again and can hook it up to an antenna. So I'm just going to leave that all hooked up in there now and go ahead and put the headliner in there. We can access this fine now through the door in the headliner. This whole section from here across opens up in the bulkhead there to get access to that upper baggage compartment, so I can just go ahead and put that upper headliner in there. I got the headliner all in, and that went in pretty good. Of course, I've had it in and out a dozen times. Problem that I had was this row of screws right here. They didn't quite line up. I've got L brackets here that are attached to those diagonals. There's two diagonals that go from this spar back to the rear of the cabin area there, and I've made some L brackets to attach to those to help support this headliner and keep it from oil canning so bad. Anyway, I got those in there. They've got nut plates in them, and I had a difficult time lining these holes up here. It wasn't too bad, but they didn't go right in. This left side, they went in pretty good, but the right side was a little harder. But this right side, I've got hangers on there, ADL clamps on there, wire clamps on there for the wire bundle that goes back for the ELT. So it may be that I disturbed that a little bit when I ran this extra wire back there afterwards, and I didn't put the headliner back in to line that back up again. But otherwise it went in pretty good. I've got the two window panels put in, just snapped in, but I've got the right one in. And again, it was a pain in the butt getting it in. I knew it would be without having access to the outside and be able to eyeball to line up those holes. These ones back here in the back in particular were a problem. But I got those easier than I got the ones up here on the top. But with this thing being flexible, the nut plates are in this headliner panel and they go through this, and so getting those lined up was a little bit of a chore. But I got it. It didn't go too bad. Now I've got to do the left side. I've left the front portion of the side panel and the window panel here undone because I have to put in the weather stripping that goes around the door here, and I have to make a shield, a piece of metal that goes over here to hold this window in and to fare in this window here when it goes in. So I'm just leaving those screws out until time comes to put all that stuff in. And then of course we've got the wing root panels that go in here, and they'll attach and they'll finish out this window panel here and the headliner right there. Now, using all stainless steel hardware on here. The fasteners, the screws are stainless steel, and the nut plates that I put in for the most part were stainless steel. And of course stainless steel has a tendency to gall. So I've assembled all these before dry, but now I'm putting these in. I'm putting a little bit of this anti-seize on there. And where that peralcatone kind of made a mess and got on your fingers and got spread around and stuff like that a little bit, this anti-seize is really nasty compared to it. I mean, it's got carried in grease, I guess, or some kind of grease or oil, and it's this nickel, whatever the silver stuff is in there that makes it the anti-seize. And you just put a little teeny bit on the screw threads, and of course it gets on your fingers and it gets on the container, and the screws don't go straight into the holes right away, and especially these black on black in here in this dark interior, it's kind of hard to see. Anyway, they wind up getting everywhere. This stuff washes off pretty good with paint thinner, so I keep a rag saturated with paint thinner around and wipe everything down with it pretty regular so it doesn't get smeared around too much. But the right side's on pretty much, so now we'll tackle the left side and get that window put in. Okay, that section of the interior and the rear baggage compartment, or from the back seat back, is all installed. Got the side panels both on. I put my little pouches in for the flotation vests, and the little pouch on the side over there for the clipboard. Everything is on and all buttoned down. I had a little bit of trouble finding the holes there on that side. Those ones on the lower ones on that window panel were kind of tough because those are nut zerts in there instead of nut plates, and so they don't have near as much leeway as far as lining the screws up to them and stuff. But got it all done, got it all tied down, all in. Oh, that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. That's the first time it's all been together since it was like that, since it was initially built. That much is pretty much finished. Now we'll start moving our way forward. I can do these wing roots, get the wiring bundles hung up on those and the fuel lines and stuff hung up on those, and get ready for putting in that door frame or that window frame on that left side. Keep working forward. I have to do the primer lines in the front there in front of the instrument panel and put those control cables in for the carburetor heat mixture and so on. I'll get busy and work my way that direction.